in a way, play its role in our life, in our society in particular. Of course, we would see that the Bible and our faith became the basis in our social organization of life in society, especially during the pre-modern world when the church occupied a very, very important influence and position of power. Okay? But what happened during the secularizing modern world? We will try to investigate that. And what did moral um, theologians, what did they do in reference to the secular world to be able to reassert the meaning of Christian wisdom and, and mores in our society? Eventually, we'll understand this in the debate. The hermeneutics we will talk about next meeting. Okay. First, okay, what we know that in a pre-modern time, the Bible became the basis of the organization of life in society, which was under the control of the church. The church leadership interpreted what became the basis of the laws in society. You have to understand that during the pre-modern times, the Bible was only at the hands of the church's leaders and even of the monks, etc. Because there was no printing press. Okay? And there were only a few copies, some the work of the monks in particular was copying, and then they were made available to the leaders of the church. And the general public, the lay people, never had access to the Bible. And so they had to listen to the authorities of the church on what and how they interpreted the Bible. Okay? As far as the pre-modern setup is concerned. Okay, but later on we know that especially when the Reformation period came, what happened? Okay, during the period of Reformation, okay, the Reformation fathers, Luther, Calvin, John Knox, okay, Henry VIII, etc., critically raised questions against the social arrangement under the church's control. There were a lot of abuses also. You can understand why, for example, Luther reacted to the church and her power and abuses in society. And that gave way, okay, to the Bible during the time, okay, after the Reformation, especially in 1517, okay, there was already the beginning of the flourishing of the printing press, okay, and the Bible began to be taken away only under the control, interpretation, and hold of the church, but they were brought back to the people, and people were allowed to have personal interpretation of the Bible as a result of the Protestant Reformation. Okay, we will see how interpretation of the Bible happened, especially as a result of the Protestant reforms. Okay, we'll see that later on. But at the moment, it is sufficient that the Reformation period brought about certain crises on how to use and interpret the Bible. There were conflicting ways of doing that to the point that it gave rise to real serious conflicts in society between the different denominations of Christianity. Okay, the Huguenots, okay, were actually persecuted in France and some other countries. They had to fly. Okay, the Catholics were actually persecuted in England, etc. And there was this wars, no, 100 years of war between France and England. All of this gave rise to a conflictive society, and the reason for the conflict was religion. Clear? So the question, if you are in a society like that, can you make religion as the basis for how you institute what is good and what is normative in society? Can that be possible? And the problem is they do not agree. They quarrel and they enter into war and conflicts. How could you then make religion, interpreted very differently by different groups, become the basis for the organization of society? And that gave rise to new arrangement, no? Eventually led to the socio-political religious crisis, okay, that had to give rise to a modern project. What is the modern project? Okay, if in pre-modern ethos, tradition, especially heavily based on religious theological perspective, was prominent, eventually it was erased and it was taken over by secular humanists' rationality. Okay? The process of secularization happened. Okay, religion cannot anymore function in the public sphere because it becomes the cause of struggle and crisis. It used to be the narrative vision that was very, very important in epistemology. When you learn about your faith, you know, you are taught about many narratives, okay? And the epistemological process by which you're able to learn always was embodied in many different, stories, moral lessons that you draw from such stories, okay? And there was so much use of imagination and memory for that matter. But this was erased in the modern project and it was taken over by scientific and universal rationality. Ethics cannot be based on stories which are perceived to be infantile, very childish. And then it had to be based on more scientific and universal rationality. That is the reason why we talk about Kantian ethics, universal ethics. You talk about utilitarian ethics that actually was scientifically, organized in such a way that you can talk about felicity, calculus, no, very, very scientific in approach. It's because it went through a process of rationalization of the life world, of the life sphere. And then in the old arrangement, particularly in the pre-modern times, community was very, very important, especially the authorities in the community. But this was actually downplayed, and what replaced it was actually atomization of individuals. Becomes very important is the right of the individual. Okay, the isolation of the individual, rights, etc. I have to be recognized not only as part of a total piece of reality, okay, but I can exist as an individual, okay, with my own needs, with my own purposes, with my own identity, with my own particular rights as a person. Are you familiar with the novel Robinson's Crusoe, written by Defoe? Are you familiar with that? Al, have you heard about Robinson's Crusoe in literary
No,
studies?
Father.
Okay, Robinson's Crusoe is a very, very interesting, very small book, and it is considered that as the first modern novel. Note, it is the first modern novel in literary studies. What is the what is the story about Robinson's Crusoe? Robinson's Crusoe is about a story of a man who actually was traveling with a ship, that actually experienced wreckage. The ship, because of the storm in the sea, actually got destroyed, and he was able to survive, and he was actually drifted, and he was thrown into an island. And in that island, he actually had to experience a lot of odysseys, and eventually he was able to survive. As if saying, very interestingly, okay, that man can actually exist on his own in his own capacity as an individual, like an island. You understand? So that, according to literary critics, is a typology of what a modern man is called to be. Okay? So it is a call to become individual. You have to be able to recognize the individual existence of a particular person who can survive and who has value on himself as his own, etc. Okay? And so,
Father, there is
having said that,
Father.
okay, there, yes, go ahead.
There is some movie about that.
Yes,
There is a movie about that shot in Papua New Guinea. Have
yes,
you
there
watched
is
that
a
before?
movie about that.
It was made in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, there is.
Yes.
Ah, okay, that's very
Uh,
good. There is so that I have
Robinson
watched
Crusoe. Yeah.
two versions. Yeah, there is
Yeah.
also a French
There is a ship.
movie on that. That's very,
Yes.
very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, if you watch that, that's a very interesting rendition of a modern man. That in literary criticism, okay, that is considered as the first modern novel written by Defoe. Okay, just to be able to illustrate that the individual is what really matters. That is the most important. Okay, in its singularity, in its own atomized individual existence. Because the process there is the process of individualization. Okay, so the process of secularization comes along with the process of rationalization and the process of individualization. That is characteristic of the modern project. And you know that the philosopher actually that is identified as the one that actually, in a way, started the whole movement uh, in the modern project was who? Rene. It was Rene, who is the philosophers here. Do you remember? Matthew, do you know who is the
Rene Descartes.
philosopher associated?
Yes,
Rene Descartes.
Descartes.
Okay? Why? Rene Descartes actually speaks about the subject as the rule of all. Okay? The methodic doubt, you remember? Actually, the subject can put everything in question. Okay? All traditions, all other existence have to be put in question, except the thinking subject. Cogito ergo sum. The fact that I think I exist and every other existence, somehow it's put into question through the methodic doubt. So even God's existence could be put into question and could be analyzed by the human mind. You understand? Of course, Rene Descartes remained to be a religionist, okay, but that already the shift to the subject, yan tawag nila, shift to the subject began was the beginning of the modern ethos and modern rationality. Okay, now that with the mind that actually the modern rationality is taking over the life world, society therefore has to be organized not on the basis of the Jewish ethics, not on the basis of the Lutheran ethics, not on the basis of Calvinist ethics, Catholic ethics, Buddhist ethics, or Confucian ethics. Because if you are going to base society on the basis of religion, you will end up having a lot of trouble because people belonging to their tradition cannot negotiate and cannot allow, possibility of transformation of their belief systems, which are actually the sources of their own principles and convictions in life. Okay, these are the fake morality that we talk about. Okay, early on. You understand? So what then becomes the basis of organizing society? Okay, that is the universal, autonomous, ethical reasoning, which is in the mind of Kant is actually the religion of pure secular reason. Is that clear? Pure reason. Whatever the mind autonomously pursues as good and normative in society is what is legislated in Congress, not what you believe as Catholics, not what you believe as Lutherans, but the basis of our own determination of what is good and be imposed as rules in society should be the product of our conventional uh, agreement, okay, based on our own rationality as members of Congress. Do you understand? You cannot be reasoning according to Moses, according to Jesus. You cannot do that in Congress. It is pure secular rationality. Do you understand? Because if you begin to argue from the basis of religion, then the question will always be, but that is the interpretation you have from your own particular ethos. So here, actually, we talked about this early on. You remember, okay, when we talk about John Rawls, who is actually a proponent of, in his theory of justice, the proponent of Kantian ethics in our contemporary world today. Okay, he talks about that this is the political conception of pure secular rationality is our definition of what are the rights of humanity that need to be promoted, defined, and protected. You understand? Okay? And they are what we refer to as thin morality. Thin. Very morality is very thin. It's about just trying to reason for what is rightfully belonging to every individual person that need to be protected. Is that clear? Okay? Now, in our contemporary world, if you want to remain to be a Christian, to be a Catholic, to be a Lutheran, to be a Jew, to be a Confucian, to be a Muslim, you can do that, but only in the private enclaves of your own particular tradition. Okay? There, where you can practice the thickness of your morality. But you cannot, at least within political liberalism, in the way we organize society politically liberally, then you can actually function in the privacy of the enclaves of your tradition and not in the public sphere. Of course, there has been debate on whether we should be able to re-enter the public sphere. Of course, there are so many different theologies: public theology, liberation theology, uh, uh, or political theology are beginning to re-enter and occupy that space. But we have to be able to understand that within the context of a secularizing world that had serious doubts about the role of religion in public, actually, this became the result of the whole reflection of humanity. Okay, now the question that is raised is there are some people and theologians who negotiated. Okay, that's okay, but we have to renegotiate with modern mind and begin to in a way respect the modern ethical discourses. Di ba? Liberal theologians, that's why they're called liberal, are beginning to talk about the role of religion, okay, and how to be able to appropriate the contemporary autonomous reason in the way we live our lives, even within our own religious enclaves. Okay, and so these raise critical questions regarding the uniqueness of Christian ethics. Liberal theology negotiated with the secular ethical rationality. Okay, and therefore let's negotiate, let's communicate, let's deal with modern mind, okay, coming from our resources but not articulate of our resources. Okay, for example, if you're a Christian, you cannot be talking about Christ or about the Bible in Congress. If you're a Christian, you carry with you the rationality of Christianity, but not in a language only understandable to Christians, you see? But there is something in Christianity that you can articulate in a very rational way. Yeah? Christianity, for example, to the prophets talk about justice. How do you re-articulate that in a manner that it could be understood even by Muslims or even by other traditions? Because you are actually trying to translate them in the rational order, in a language communicable to all, that everyone could understand, as long as they are rational. You understand? And that's what liberal theology or liberal ethics has done. Okay? Now, this has brought about a debate. Okay. The debate is there are two positions being taken taken in the debate over the uniqueness of Christian morality. In liberal theology, they talk about this in terms of autonomous ethics, that ethics can be respected in autonomy, that it could be pursued on the basis of rationality, that we can think about what is really normative and good for society on the basis of what our capacity can actually resolve to do as human thinking subjects. Is that clear to you? Okay? And so, but the others would say, no, our normative in society cannot but always be based on faith, you see? And if you're going to argue in public, you cannot just give up the specificity and the uniqueness of Christian discourse, because if you were to do that, you are actually committing false humility, and you're actually depriving the public of the richness of that tradition that could actually, in a way, influence our own way of pursuing, defining, and promoting what is good. Are you with me? Okay? And therefore, according to the post-liberals, they are attacking the liberal ethicists. Okay? The post-liberals would say, you are actually depriving the world of the unique specific character of that comes from our Christian tradition, which you should be able to be articulate about. And they say, okay, in public, you remain to be a Christian and you live your Christian life and follow its narrative. And in the process, you out narrate other traditions. You out narrate secular tradition and you say, you see, I am happy as a Christian. I live my life. I go to Mass every day and I can communicate with the community I'm part of. And I'm very happy with my life. I have a profound connection with God and I can share my faith with everyone. And you, as a secular, you know, modern thinker, your life is in chaos. You're so confused. You don't know where to go, etc. So it's like saying, I am out narrating your own story. And therefore, if I'm out narrating your story through my own example of witness of my life as a Christian, I can convert you to becoming part of my tradition and my community. Okay, that's the position of the post-liberals. But as far as the liberals are concerned, we still have to respect the autonomy and say we have to be able to enter into discourse in the common space and bring the values of the kingdom in a manner that is rationally understandable to everyone engaged in that debate. Do you understand? And that position has given way to two positions. Yeah, that's it. Okay? How do you position yourself in the debate? Are you for faith ethics or are you for autonomous ethics? James, where do you want to locate yourself? Are you for autonomous ethics or are you for faith ethics? If you understand it correctly. Yes.
Father, I am for faith ethics, Father.
Okay. So,
Mm.
which means that you can actually just live your life within the enclave of the tradition. But what happens in terms of your capacity to enter into discourse with a non-Christian or with a non-Catholic? So you're giving up that capacity to be able to enter into dialogue with a non-Christian who cannot articulate or who cannot understand your own language. Matthew, what do you think about that? Are you also identifying
Yes,
yourself with faith ethics?
yes, Father.
Okay. Who among you is in favor of autonomous ethics? Al,
Father, I'm not both. I'm
huh?
in balance.
Okay.
Balance, autonomy and faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, our own response to this is uh, if you are talking within your own particular tradition, you are belonging to the faith ethics. But if you're engaging with a non-Christian, then you have to be able to autonomously pursue what's
Yeah.
rationally acceptable, okay, and understandable in that debate. Okay. Now, this the proponents of faith ethics, okay, and or rather of the autonomous ethics are Alphonse Sawyer, Joseph Fuchs, Bruno Schiller in Europe, Charles Curran, and Richard McCormick in the United States. Their position is no unique morality for Christians. They claim that Christians actually, if they are true to themselves, is only articulate what is actually truly human. Okay? If you're going to live out your life in a very truly human way, you are actually already becoming a Christian in that sense. The general content of Christian morality is the same for Christians and non-Christians alike. All people of goodwill can arrive at the demands of moral life, including self-sacrificing love, even with the use of autonomous reason alone. Is that clear? So there is no need for extra normative morality or moral content in Revelation. If ever Revelation comes to us, they are only motivational. They only inspire us, but they actually do not add something extra uniquely substantial to the way humanity should pursue what is normative in living our life in society. Okay? So it calls for a rightful autonomy of earthly affairs that enjoy their own laws and values. On the other hand, okay, that is autonomy ethics. But on the other hand, faith ethics, Glaubens ethics, the origin is the pre-Vatican renewal movement of moral theology. That we need to recapture actually the biblical inspirations, etc. The position is a portion of Christian morality is only revealed, okay, but unique and therefore close to all non-believers. If you do not believe, you will not be able to have the grasp of what is intuitively substantial in the Christian moral discourse. You have to be able to enter into the language world of Christians, be able to understand what is at the very heart substantially of that Christian morality. So uniqueness found only in the Bible. One can really be doing Christian ethics if one cannot do that unless uh, if if one does not recognize the revealed character of this morality. Natural law morality is not sufficient for Christians, but needs the supplement of supernatural morality based on faith and grace. In this debate, there are so many theologians, moral theologians who participated and came up with uh, kind of nuancing, okay, in this debate. I'm not going to discuss with you this, but it is just to illustrate that there are different ways by which this has been argued, okay? As far as autonomous ethics is concerned, there are those who argue that morality actually uh, of Christians could be referred to identifying the ideals. Moral obligation is something that we can pursue in common with all the other human individuals, regardless of his religion. Okay, there you talk about parenetic, something that inspires or exhortatory, but what is normative is actually available for all. Okay, you can talk about the specificity of Christian morality, but it is not really substantially distinct, okay, from human normative discourses of secular autonomous reason. It could you Bible can serve as motivation, but as far as evaluation of moral life is concerned, autonomous rationality can actually settle with what could be normative for you for all. But according to those who are following the Glaubens ethics of faith ethics, they say there is a distinction substantially different from Christian ethics versus human ethics. The supernatural perspective is different from natural perspective. Redemption somehow is also a lot beyond and substantially different from mere discourse of creation of humanity. And you talk about redeemed in Christ is something substantially different from our own versus our fallen human nature. And then you talk about evangelical For example, when you talk about virtues or poverty, chastity, or obedience, there are evangelical that could not be appreciated in terms of moral autonomous ethics. Okay, then they're arguing, therefore, according to Glauben's ethics, particularly proposed by post-liberal ethics, it has to be uniquely embraced. And if you are a Christian, you cannot be in this particular tradition, that you have to be able to live its life and its stories accordingly. Okay, and that you just have to abandon the idea of negotiating and and entering into dialogue with non-Christians, because it's grace of God that will eventually convert them when they see that their narrative, the secular narrative, is actually outnarrated with the Christian narrative. Is that clear? I think it's time. I'm so sorry. You see, but there are a lot to be discussed. Next meeting, I'm going to start by asking you by entertaining questions about this. Okay, and then we will move on hermeneutics. I would like to ask.
Father,
I'm sorry,
pardon po, Father, medyo malabo po yung
Alin.
mahina po yung book.
Okay.
Next
We
meeting
we end we end with the second part of our discussion this morning. We will talk about hermeneutics in the next meeting. But before we start with hermeneutics, I'm going to entertain questions about these two parts of our discussion today. I have written a document, okay, that is published in the book of Professor Biringer on normativity of the future. And the title of the work that I ask you to read is Narrating Christian Ethics. There you will be able to understand the discourse of post-liberal ethicists, okay? Hans Fry, Hauerwas, etc. Okay, and George Lindbeck. And then we are moving into coming up with a new discourse that appropriates the discourse of Biringer on hermeneutics. It describes the whole history of modern hermeneutics that I actually painted in three main approaches. Okay, and then I will introduce what I actually propose in the discourse as liberative analectics. Okay, please read the text. Okay, I when I ask you to read some texts and make